Okay, we're back for hopefully one final interaction with this Bernardo Kastrup interview. Just got done doing the version, the little bit on Sean Carroll's many worlds interpretations, idealism, and quantum mechanics. So that was very interesting. There's still more on Sean Carroll, so I'm going to get right to that. This is right where I left off, just hopping right back into it. And my heater in here is working very well, so I might
Change
turn that off.
the list a little bit because Bernardo already answered a ton of stuff that Sean Carroll brought up.
By all means, yeah, it's all
Um,
good.
so you already mentioned because he said like the huge barrier to idealism is an external world that's non-conscious, and it seems to be objectively real and complicated and independent of our mind. But you already answered that. He says. Human beings are identical to fundamental reality. Reality privately within the inside is aware and has qualitative nature to it, which seems to be in tension with the qualitative descriptions out there. You already answered that one too. Uh, wow.
Most people who think idealism is nonsense are not aware of developments in idealism. So they are
No,
burning straw men.
True. It's so true.
I would agree with that.
sorry, 1 second here.
No, yeah. So I'll just add on top of that really quick. It really is the case. I actually did a response video, a stream to Graham Oppie, which you debated Graham Oppie a while back, or actually he it ended up being him just asking you questions because even he knew that like, well, maybe I don't know as much about idealism as I thought I did. Maybe he's not ready for a debate, and I'm glad he did that. That's just the right thing to do. It's before you debate idealism, before you want to object to it, you should at least find out more about it. And I'm not saying that as like against Oppie per se, but really against Sean Carroll at this point. That's the
At,
target of
le-
what I'm getting at.
at least about what happened to it after Bishop Barkley in the 17th
Yeah.
century.
I mean,
At,
it's true. Barkley was an idealist, but there's a lot that happened. Lots of idealism has happened after that. It used to be a dominant view, Hamid Blah. There are even other idealists besides Bernardo. I think Helen Yetter Chapo has been writing some stuff on this. Chalmers is friendly to idealism. So idealism has been taken seriously. I think it should be taken seriously, insofar as you really are dissatisfied with physicalism. It's one of the alternatives. So yeah, I do think people misunderstand it because they think that it means subjective idealism. That's all in my mind, and that's not the way these guys are thinking about this stuff. So I agree with
least
this.
that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, too, even Barkley, I mean, so many
Oh
people
no, we're gonna talk about
misunderstand
Barkley.
Barkley. They think he
Oh shit.
denies common sense or they think he denies the existence of ordinary objects. And clearly,
He
idealism
doesn't.
has developed. Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, we clearly have.
Well, hold on, don't fucking bring Barkley up, dude. So yeah, Barkley's a whole can of worms. No one knows what the fuck he meant. Obviously, it's people debate about this stuff. There's this whole journals devoted to trying to figure out what the hell Barkley was fucking talking about, dude. That's irritating. Okay, so certainly Barkley thought that the ordinary objects that we interact with were in his Barkley's mind, not out there in the external world. What he thought was God, there were just spirits and God or something like that. Although even that's a questionable interpretation of Barkley, so who knows? But I guess what this guy was trying to make fun of was the I refute you thusly kicking a rock sort of objection to even on Barkley standards, that's a bad argument. So I agree with that. So I don't know. So maybe I'm getting too irritated for no reason. All right, leave Barkley out of it, guys.
More advanced versions of idealism right now that I think are superior to Barclay's. But even Barclay's idealism can withstand almost just about any objection that I tend to hear from detractors from idealism. It's pretty lazy
Really.
thinking on the most on the part of
He
many other
was not an
people.
idiot. He was far from an idiot. I think
Yeah, duh.
the weakness of his argument is that he sees perception as the thing in itself. So he always needs something to be perceiving for there to be a stable external world. He famously in one of the two hypotheses he raised about it, in one of them he famously said, "Well, God is always perceiving the world." Um, and I think where things can be articulated better is that in addition to perception, it's the Kantian insight that came 100 years later. Perception doesn't need to be the thing in itself. The thing in itself doesn't even need to look like perception.
Yeah,
It can be
exactly.
something else that is represented as perception. So you can still have noumenal states that constitute the world, which exist even when they are not being perceived. And I think that leads to a more parsimonious, more elegant model than a model in which you
Yeah,
all
that's transcendental idealism, which is one of the updates in idealism. But yeah, Barkley, he thought that perception was the thing in itself. Yeah, I guess I see what he means when he says thing in itself. It means the noumena. Barkley thought that the perception was the thing behind. There was no behind the appearances. For Barkley, there was no. It did not make sense to say that there was something other than the experience. So when I'm seeing this cup of tea right here, this shade of tea, that it literally kind of is almost self-refuting to try to ask, like, what's the real underlying nature of that thing? That is its real underlying nature, according to Barkley. That's all there is to it. This is it. It's an experience. It's what I see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. Now, of course, there's got to be something in which that experience takes place. So there's the mind. And then, of course, you get the problem of the external world, just as he was saying. So, famously, Barkley once said, why is the, stuff there when I'm not looking at it? And he says, well, God's always looking at it. God's always perceiving it. And then you think, okay, wait a minute. So where is this stuff existing in God's mind, right? Because the ideas only exist in mind. So when I'm in my bed at night, the street outside, no one's looking at it, the tree and so forth, it's existing because God's always perceiving it. So then when I perceive it, then there's the tree out there and also my perception of it. So it really quickly gets hard to make sense of Barkley's view. I agree. It really gets hard to make sense of any of these views. But yes, I agree. So that was sort of, the idea that there's something outside the mind, while nonetheless preserving the idea that experience is somehow constructed by the mind, was an important advance. I agree with that, this way of putting things, definitely.
always need perception to be ongoing.
Okay.
And I think that's where Bishop Barkley's model is inferior to some of the other stuff that came later. But he's certainly not incoherent. He's not an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so Kyle, did you happen to find the quotes or the next question you wanted to get at?
Yeah, because he chopped down most of Sean Carroll stuff. Like he wasn't even talking about so Sean Carroll then says that we are just made of atoms, okay, and that there's no room for anything else. So he always assumes the dualism in there. He says it's just a pattern that is conscious, and then says there's no problem for physicalism because it's only easy problems. There's no room for extra stuff. Again, the dualism.
How does he know this shit? How does he know this shit? I mean,
exactly.
Does he have an explicit and coherent model of how consciousness arises from atoms alone? Because you need to have that to declare that there is no need for anything other than atoms. And we know he doesn't.
We've already been over this a million times, but I don't think so. That's not what we need. So what we need is this idea that the trajectory of science is going to continue. And I've already talked about this in like thousands of these videos. I feel like I've made 100 trillion videos on this point already. But the idea that we don't understand something falls away once we understand it. And my big example was the water H2O example. Aristotle thought it was a simple substance with no parts for good reason. That's how it looked. Later, we thought, gee, we could explain not even explain. We found out empirically that maybe this has parts, these hydrogen and oxygen things, but we couldn't understand how they relate to their macroscopic properties. Now we think we have a story about how those things relate to their macroscopic properties, and people go around saying water is H2O is our most clear scientific identity to which all others aspire. And that was, 3,500 years or so of people thinking about water. And doing science on it. So by comparison, less than 100 years of doing serious science on the brain. So, okay, great. We need theories. We don't have them. I don't think that this is that optimism about physicalism requires much more than that. Yeah, there's some reason to think that something funny is going on with consciousness, but not enough reason to ridicule all these. I mean, I don't know. I don't really go around debating everyone about this because I don't really care. I sort of see the merits on lots of sides, but I just don't understand. I mean, I guess I do. When I was an undergraduate, I used to think, fucking Hume, he's an idiot. Now I think Hume's a brilliant philosopher, but certainly it's fun to think that people who disagree with you are idiots, but it's much more difficult to wonder why someone who's not an idiot would hold a different view. Yeah, there should be more of that. I think that's my official conclusion.
Have that. So this is an expression of belief.
Carroll thinks the zombie argument is an argument for physicalism because he thinks the introspection would not be any more accurate to describe internal states, whether
Yeah, so we already talked about this. They are talking about the Philip Goff thing and Carroll, whereas before I don't know where they were getting all that. Was that from that? I didn't catch any of that. So maybe I missed something. Is there a part of that I didn't watch? I don't know. Yeah. I've already said a lot about this point too. I don't know if I'm going to belabor
were
this,
zombies
but,
or not. So the reports about introspection are exactly the same as the zombie would have. So he says he's an emergentist, but then says it's unreliable. And then he becomes an eliminativist about it.
No, that's not what happened. No, what? Huh? No, what he's saying is that if you're a dualist and you think that zombies really are possible, then you think that consciousness plays no role, like in, for example, producing your statements about consciousness. So since your whole reason for believing in dualism is based on this introspective report, you, the dualist, now have to face this problem about the unreliability, so-called, of introspection. That's what Sean Carroll was trying to say, as far as I understand it. Your whole argument, the dualist whole argument, is based on this. Well, based on my experience, consciousness seems like this, and that doesn't seem to be something which can be explained physically. So how do you illustrate that? The zombie world. Carroll says, but the zombie world exactly shows that your first step might be unjustified because you could be a zombie. Now, my own view is that doesn't work because the non-physicalist is going to appeal to some kind of acquaintance or non-causal theory of knowledge, which is going to allow them to say, no, I'm okay because I know that I have consciousness, but the zombie isn't because the zombie doesn't, even though there's no way for the zombie to tell. They lack the knowledge. So you may not like that, but that's a view that could be developed. So I don't really know what this guy's talking about. I feel like maybe some of the questions are not being summed up very well, but maybe that's my problem. I don't know.
He doesn't understand what he's saying.
I think he does.
He seems to reject everything that's not reductive physicalism. And I want to know what he would say about last year's local realism being disproven with the Nobel Prize.
I think it's more than local realism that was disproven. I think non-contextuality. In other words, physical realism was disproven. But yeah, he will appeal to inaccessible parallel.
But notice, so I think that, I'm going to harp on this some more. I think that Bernardo's using the term physical realism in a way that is making hay when shouldn't. Is that even an expression, making hay? I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, okay, so physical realism, he's taking it to mean, well, we've refuted the idea that there's something physically real there. And yeah, in a sense, we have that the determinate property of being here or there, up or down, etc., that's physically real before you measure it has been refuted. I would agree with that. It's not physically real until the measurement is produced. But you can't, I would say, infer from that there isn't something physically real there. You have to instead infer from that whatever physically real thing is there doesn't have determinate properties and therefore isn't classical. It doesn't operate the way we think the world operates classically. sort of defined by Newtonian mechanics and our ordinary common sense experience of the world. So when you say you've refuted physical realism and then say therefore idealism, I think you've moved too quickly from the idea that there aren't determinate properties which are physically real before measurement to the claim that there's nothing physically real before measurement. Cool.
Versus an undefined, miraculous hidden variables to account for that.
Yeah, and then he says, I don't think the idea that we have internal conscious experiences, therefore somehow by the chain of logic, we need to include that as a category in our ontology. It just doesn't seem to have much purchase for me.
I don't know where he said that.
An expression of belief. It doesn't seem to have much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I disagree with a lot of my physicalist friends who are there's a lot of people who are more physicalist than I am. Like in my primary commitment, I've said this all over, but people always jump on me because I tend to defend things and they say, "Oh, you're a believer of that." And I say, "I'm a believer of lots of things, guys." But my own view, my real view is that I should drink this. My own view is simply that physicalism hasn't been refuted. Therefore, it's as viable as any of these other views about the ultimate nature of reality. It may not be your favorite, and it may have reasons to be weighted in such and such a way in your total calculation for how the evidence falls, but it's not something that's incoherent or silly. So that's a pretty low standard, a low bar. I'm not actually believing in physicalism. I'm only believing that it's not silly to believe in physicalism. And I know people who really believe in physicalism, and so I think those people aren't silly. I think it's not silly to believe in that. I also know people who really believe in idealism. I think it's not silly to believe in that. What I do think it's kind of silly is to believe in something so strongly on the basis of you believe whatever you want. I just don't think that the evidence warrants really coming down super hard on a position here. But hey, if people make the bets that they're willing to make, and if you want to go all in on a certain position, that's fine. I just don't think that means that other people are silly or wrong. But I do like the way that all of this stuff, I do like the way Bernardo champions idealism. He's arguing passionately for it. I do respect and admire that. It should be argued for passionately and eloquently in the way that he does. It is a view that people should take seriously and fight past their knee-jerk reaction to. I wish you could do that just using arguments. Just reason was enough to show that this is a worthwhile thing to think about, even if you don't like it. But, maybe rhetoric is what it takes, especially, I don't know. I just wish all of these things would be more argument-based. Argument.
Purchase for him. Okay, it's what he believes, but it's not an argument.
Yeah, we want arguments.
Non-physicalist arguments about he just thinks that the Frank Jackson argument about Mary seeing red in the black and white room, he thinks it's just a play of words. So he's doing PCS, the
phenomenal cope strategy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did. We talked about this already. They did the whole first part of this was about that. So I already listened to them talking about their weird views on the phenomenal concept strategy. I think Carroll's position, when I watched his response, he seemed like he was mad, but he keeps saying, look, I got the argument right. And I gave a diagnosis of what I think was really going on. But then I was thinking about it while I was waiting for the roadside assistance. Yep, my car died. Did I tell you that already? I think I did. My battery died. That's old school. Having batteries die. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, I think what I was saying was that he kept saying I got the argument right. And what did he mean by that? Well, what he said, I thought, was that the real question is there anything in this thought experiment which the physicalists can't explain? And so the setup is Mary's in her room. She's never seen red. She knows all the physical facts. She comes out, she sees red, she learns something new. Is there anything there that the physicalist can't explain? And Carroll's answer was no. It's just that she comes to have an experience. Different neurons are activated. She couldn't activate those neurons, so she couldn't know what it was like to see red. I do think that there's more to this than these guys were letting on. I wish they would follow up about this, but I don't know. Well, I actually did reach out to Sean and say, would you like to talk about this? He said, I'm sick of talking about zombies. So what are you going to do?
The non-physicalists, because it's just an account of physical stuff moving in the brain again. But what is that stuff?
If one thinks that there is nothing more to redness than a number corresponding to a terahertz frequency, then it's difficult to argue with that person. Because the person starts from a denial of the obvious. And if you start from a denial of the obvious, how can somebody else engage
Well, what's
with
he
you?
saying?
Because
He's saying that so if you're a physicalist about color, you're denying the obvious. I mean, physicalists about color think that the color red is some physical property. Then there's also the experience of red. Now, what is that? How are they related? So which part is denying the obvious? You don't think the color red is a physical property of objects? I think that sort of seems obvious to me. That it's a certain wavelength doesn't seem obvious, but that it's a physical property of objects. Let's not even say physical, because that'll make people angry who like Bernardo. Let's just say it's a property of the tomato, the redness. Okay. If all there is to the world is mathematically describable properties, then certainly seems like it could be that the physical red is a wavelength or a reflectance profile. Now, the experience of red isn't that. So the redness of red, if you mean by that the red that the physical property has, the object has, so stop saying physical, that the external object over there, the thing of which I'm perceiving, has, well, there's no reason to think that that must be like the red that I experience, unless you're a naive realist or something like that. And some people are. But, I'm not. I know some naive realists, though, and I think that's a view worth taking seriously as well, although I think that's hard to make sense of. So anyway, I don't know. The redness of red being the experiential property, the thing that you would identify the physical property with, the thing with which we use to identify, to pick out the physical property. That thing isn't a reflectance profile. It may be some brain property. But is that also denying the obvious? I don't know. So it's not clear to me how this is supposed to be where we're denying the obvious here.
You already don't agree with the starting premise. To think that experiential states can be fully accounted for, in other words, to think that if you provide a long enough list of the right numbers, you will have said everything there is to say about any experiential state. To me, this is so obviously untrue. Like, I don't care which numbers you put in that list and how long the list is. You will never be able to say everything there is to say about the feeling of heartbreak just by giving me a list of numbers. I mean, this seems to be so obvious, so in your face obvious.
Yeah, I know. And everything that is seen so obvious has eventually fallen away to theorizing. I mean, go back and read these guys talking about water. They are losing their mind, saying, what's the real essence of it? We'll never be able to understand how the composition of water relates to its properties. Even gold. How did the physical properties of gold relate to its being yellow and malleable and whatever? These guys didn't think there was any way to understand that. We now do. A lot has changed. So, of course, we're not just going to give you a list of numbers. It's going to be a list of numbers attached to theories about stuff. So, of course, just saying, how can a list of numbers explain how water changes from solid to vapor to liquid? Well, it turns out, if you know the number for the cationic bond, then, okay, so there's some other things besides number, ionic bonds, for example, then some of this stuff starts to fall away. So what we await is that. I don't know. So yeah, it does seem like, yeah, we don't have it yet. Great. As I've been saying over and over, the reason for thinking we might have it someday is because we've always had it with everything else. Maybe that's not a good argument. Maybe you're not optimistic about the trajectory of science with respect to this. But it certainly isn't silly or clinging to some naive hope to say, in every other naysaying case, advancing understanding of the world coupled with a deeper theory of the world led to an understanding, at least an outline of an understanding of how these properties work. I mean, we're just not in a position to know. We don't know enough about the brain to say what we might learn about it, which could alter our understanding of what's going on. And I can't tell you what that is because we don't know it yet, just like they couldn't tell you about chemistry before they came up with the theory of chemistry. So, yeah. Now, is that a good inductive generalization or prediction, or is it a naive clinging to, well, that's, something we could discuss, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't get
that
it.
to deny this, to me, is to preempt any debate. If I have to engage somebody who starts by denying this, it's like, okay, no, that we don't even start. I cannot honestly engage in a discussion that starts by denying the obvious. So
Well, this is the last thing about Sean Carroll here. It's the epistemology that we talked about at the beginning. So Lucas Perry just quickly says that the worlds are indistinguishable because there's no epistemic tool for saying whether or not you're actually conscious, right? So he's saying they're basically causally isomorphic, so you wouldn't know whether or not you were in the conscious world or unconscious world. And then Sean Carroll basically wraps up by saying, if you think that there can be zombies that tell you about their inner experiences, but don't have them, then you must believe that the connection between inner experiences and what you say about them, what you report about them, what you think about them, is entirely 100% unreliable. But you just threw out the whole, we experience something.
I'm not sure about this particular point.
So he's saying that is to you guys, to who fans of zombies. Sean Carroll's not saying that about him. He's saying it to you. And we've already been over that, though, for his reasons for thinking that. And reasons for doubting it. If there
By
are
Lucas.
Any. Let's hear what he says.
Yeah.
I don't know who this. Oh yeah, this Lucas
This
guy. I
particular
don't know who.
point by Lucas.
I don't know who this guy is, but according to everybody who's in their right mind, I know that I have consciousness right now. So do you. And all of the Chalmers style arguments are based on knowledge about your own consciousness, starting with that. And even in the case where you're having dancing and fading qualia, we're swapping out neurons, and your experience is popping in and out, and blah blah blah. All of that is about knowledge, about how could you know about your experience, and how it would be very odd to be disconnected in this way. So we have to start kind of with this common sense view that we know about our own conscious experience. That right now I know about, that I'm conscious. Then could you conceive of not me lacking consciousness, but something physically identical to me? See, that's how the zombie experiment goes. You don't start with you being a zombie and then going, gee, am I a zombie? No, of course not. You start with knowing you're not. I know I'm not a zombie. I know because I've experienced right now. Now, sure, the theoretical zombie would say all that stuff, but they wouldn't know it in the way that I do because they wouldn't have this consciousness in front of them. So, yeah. I don't really think that this, if you think zombies are conceivable, you undermine your own reason for thinking there are zombies kind of argument really works. Although, Chalmers wrote about this. It's called The Paradox of Phenomenal Judgment in his very first book, which was his dissertation from the 96 or 97 or whatever it was. So this is something that he and zombie lovers have known about for a long time. It's why they have developed a whole theory about how you come to know about consciousness that has to do with acquaintance and stuff like that, which is a non-causal, non-physical sort of thing. Who knows what it is, but it's something which is supposed to solve this problem. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really buy this line of argument. I can see how the appeal of it. I would love for it to be the case that we could show some kind of straightforward contradiction in zombies, as opposed to only an indirect one, like how I try to do it with zombies and stuff. But I don't think it's in the cards.
Yeah,
From a
the concept.
physicalist perspective, go
Sorry,
ahead, go ahead.
I'm
No, go ahead.
lagging a bit. Sorry. It was
Uh,
just about. Sorry, I'm gonna stop.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
He says causally isomorphic, but then there's no epistemological tool about whether we know the outside world is conscious. But the starting point for most of metaphysics is that we're aware, and then you just follow the train of logic that you had at the beginning, where you talked about epistemology and bringing it upon ontology, and above beyond the curve of the earth is just more earth, etc. You have lots of
Yeah,
examples like that.
yeah. From a physical, to judge an ontology, we have to approach it in its own terms. Otherwise, we are thinking circularly or begging the question. So within the terms of physicalism, it is coherent to conceive of zombies. Not only that, it seems to be necessary that there are only
Wait. No. Zombies are a dualist thing, guys. No. So I know he's going to say that if you're a physicalist, you got to believe in zombies. Like we are zombies or something like that. That's absurd. Maybe illusionists think that. That's sort of what I think about illusionists. In fact, I know a guy who wrote a paper on this and was in this special journal issue that I edited. What was the name? I forget what the name of the paper was. I forget. Anyway, I'm trying to remember. But the whole idea was that we are zombies. He called it type Z physicalism, by the way. I wrote a lot about why I'm not a type Z physicalist. Z for zombie. So his idea was that we are zombies in the sense, Chalmers et al., that we lack phenomenal consciousness. And that what's really conceivable are not these creatures that lack this thing, but these angels that he called them, these angelic beings that have this non-physical property of phenomenal consciousness. So you can conceive of them having that, but we don't. That's this type Z view. So some people have endorsed this idea that we, in fact, are the zombies. And I sort of think illusionists secretly think that we are the zombies. And I also think that they think that the zombie world is like our world, maybe. But I don't think that, and I'm a physicalist. So I don't think you have to think that there are zombies. But and I also don't like this remark that if you start with something that he doesn't think is reasonable, he just can't engage with you. But that's his temperament, so that's him. I would like to know what reason there is for thinking that there can't be brute identities that you don't understand. So what's the argument against that?
zombies, because physicalism tries to account for everything purely in terms of structure and function, not in qualitative terms, not in terms of what it is like to perform the function or what it is like to be the structure. Physicalism denies this, so it tries to boil all of reality down to pure structure and function, abstracted away from qualitative essence.
But the physicalist, who, unless they're an eliminativist or something, is going to say that that stuff is there. It's just like the liquidity of water is there, just like gold is there, just like bridges are there. That stuff is there, but what it is physical.
In those terms, zombies are a coherent thing to conceive of and may even be a necessary.
No, they're not, because under those terms, zombies are contradictory because they're physically identical but lacking consciousness. But if consciousness is something physical, if physicalism is true, then zombies are not possible. They are impossible. Maybe they could still be conceivable, and you can deny this link between conceivability and possibility, or you might endorse zombies and think no, they're always it's always been inconceivable that there are zombies. You could go either way. However, that's the option. This is not The way.
thing to conceive of, because you can, in principle, in practice, I believe not, but in principle, given the lack of knowledge we have of all the causal structures in nature, it is in principle coherent to say that the behavior of a zombie would be identical to the behavior of a sentient human being, because the only thing that is causative in both cases is supposed to be structure and function, and qualitative states are supposed to be just a kind of epiphenomenal glow around the sentient human being, which has no causal force of its own. And structure and function across nature should be causally closed. They should be able to account for all effects without the need for there to be a qualitative state in the causal nexus to account for anything.
Unless some of those states in the causal nexus are qualitative states. Yes.
This is in principle coherent under physicalism, particularly because we don't have causal models for anything macroscopic. You cannot start from microscopic laws in physics, the physics of first principles, Feynman diagrams in quantum field theory, if you want. You cannot start from that and compute a simulation even of large molecules like DNA or large protein molecules and protein folding, because it's an explosion of complexity. There is no computer today in the world, or that will ever be, according to our current computing paradigm, that can deal with that complexity, because it's an exponential explosion. Every time you add a parameter, you multiply the complexity by a large number. So every time you add a new particle, if you're trying to construct a model from first principles up, very quickly, you cannot compute it anymore. In other words, we do not know at all whether any macroscopic causal event in the universe, any one of them, from your breathing to a cup of tea breaking on the floor, we do not know whether those can actually be accounted for in terms of physical first principles at the microscopic level. Because
we've never done any of those deductions. Well, I get what he's saying. These only predicted outcomes of experiments, but so he's trying to leave it open. I don't know. So that would be interesting to hear a debate between him and Sean Carroll over this issue.
Ever or will ever be able to run a simulation that can deal with the complexity involved. So it is an expression of faith to think that nature is causally closed if we start from first principles in foundations of physics. Nobody knows it. Nobody can know it. And most likely nobody will ever be able to know it unless our computing paradigm is completely different. Because it's a dramatic explosion of complexity, not only because of the number of particles involved, but the number of environmental influences that you have to take into account. So when Sean Carroll says there is no room for anything more than elementary subatomic particles, that is an expression of faith. That's what he believes in.
I mean, I get what he's saying. I guess what I think Carroll's point is that if the electrons, protons, etc., behave this way in the lab, then we should expect them to behave that way outside the lab. And the way they behave in the lab seems to be governed by these basic rules of quantum mechanics. And so therefore we should expect them to be governed by those rules outside the lab. Now, as far as like being a closed system and all that, I agree about that. I think that is an open question. And so this whole business about emergentism. I don't know. I think we have some reason to think there is a closed system. I don't think it gets from first principles, but I think we have some reasons to believe that the universe itself is a closed system. I don't think we have conclusive proof of it, but I think we have reason to think it's true. Okay.
It's not something that has been even remotely demonstrated.
Demonstrated is a high standard.
We do not know whether that is really true, whether we can compute causally everything of salience in nature starting from first principles. Nobody has ever done that. We can do a few dozens of elementary subatomic particles using Feynman diagrams and compute the outcome of a more complex system. A few dozen subatomic particles. I believe we can go to a few hundreds, maybe a few thousands. But That's much less than a protein molecule or a DNA molecule, let alone a cup of tea breaking on the floor or life and consciousness. And it is an extraordinary expression of faith to eliminate alternatives by saying that there is no room left for them because physicalism already accounts for everything. This is pure faith. It's almost a form of fanaticism, a form of religious fanaticism, because he should know this. He is a physicist working in foundations of physics. So this is something he should know. He should read two papers called, at least one of them is called More Really Is More. There have been a few papers published in Foundations of Physics exploring what I just said, which is we do not know whether there are coarse-grained organizational principles in nature that kick in only at higher levels of complexity. So you can't reduce everything to microscopic quantum field theory laws because other organizing principles can kick in or emerge, if you want, or kick in when the system is more complex and the environmental circumstances are more diverse. There's no way for us to verify whether this is the case or not, because laboratory experiments entail precisely making the systems small and isolated from environmental influences. That's what we call controlled conditions. The complexity explosion is too dramatic for us to explore the possibility of these coarser grained organizational principles. So even under the premises of physicalism itself, he still, forget idealism, he still cannot say that we have reasons to consider the world.
I don't know. The way he was putting it in the debate was saying, if you can show that electrons behave differently in brains than they do in a large hadron collider, so I don't think that these things that Bernard was talking about come close to demonstrating that. Um, I do. I've already said I think it's an open possibility. These things are interesting open possibilities, so I agree with that. But I think Carroll is more interested in emphasizing how much we can say given the tools that we have. Um,
Causally closed based on quantum first principles. We don't have we don't have reason to say even that. All we have is faith, a form of philosophical faith that everything should be reducible to the microscopic. If you believe that, then the rest is an implication, but you have to be cognizant that you're starting with a belief, and all but a belief. It's just a belief to say that the macro must be accounted for fully in terms of the micro. I am a reductionist. I think the complex is accounted for in terms of the less complex. But I don't think that this has to do with size, macro and micro. I think the entirety of nature can be accounted for in terms of the patterns of excitation of one field of subjectivity. This is ultimate reductionism. I'm trying to reduce the most complex to the simplest, one unexcited field of subjectivity. This is reductionism. But that field of subjectivity is the most macro thing there is. In other words, I'm trying to reduce the small to the big. And there is good reason to do that in philosophy because of the combination and decomposition problem and the heart problem and all these other things we talked about today. But there is no reason within physicalism to think that we can reduce all the macro to the micro to the point that there is no room left for anything else. That supreme epistemic arrogance married with a kind of religious like fanaticism and the ability to believe in something just because you want to believe it.
when did I disagree just become not enough? Wow.
I mean, you just evaporated Sean Carroll's whole talk. Goed gedaan. I guess the next thing would be Michael Levin's work, unless you wanted to talk, MI, about academic biases for materialism, but you already talked.
I'll just say this real quick,
Okay.
actually. The fact that Bernardo was able to like preemptively refute Sean Carroll without even hearing a lot of the questions, it goes to show, well, one that of course Bernardo's experienced and he's debated this a lot, so he knows his stuff, but that Sean Carroll is predictable, that he's not saying anything new. He's really saying the same old stuff that idealists have already addressed and refuted. And so while he's a smart physicist, when he talks about physicalism and particularly against idealism and stuff like that.
All right. So yeah. I guess I kind of I see where they're going with that. But yeah, I agree with that last comment. That in a way, there's nothing really all that exciting or new in the critiques. And I also agree that if you're going to critique, you should really know the other's view, take it seriously. So, in all that kind of sense, I'm on Bernardo's side. On the other hand, I wished he would do the same for the other side. It would be interesting to see a discussion between those two. Maybe it would have to be done. What was that? There was this place a while ago that they were doing letters back and forth. And maybe that would be better. That way they can insult each other in writing and it would be less personal, maybe. Anyway, so I would like to talk to Bernardo about these issues. I don't know if he would really want to, though, because he would just, like he said, what's the point of talking to someone like me who, according to him, starts with something silly? But I don't know. My chair is falling apart. I'm noticing this. Anyway, I got to go, guys, on that note.